A new study has linked intermittent fasting with a 91% increased risk of death.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
Personally, I'm not really an advocate of intermittent fasting. I'm the balanced nutrition guy, so keto, low carb, paleo, vegan, fasting. I tend not to recommend these approaches. But if you enjoy intermittent fasting and you found that that's what seems to work for you, you don't have anything to worry about, except increased risk of death.
Death.
Let's take a look at this. This study looked at data taken between 2003 and 2018 from self-reported dietary intakes from 20,000 people. And what it found was those who would eat all their food for the day within an 8-hour window had a 91% increased risk of death from cardiovascular disease compared to people who just ate normally. Now, for context, one of the most popular forms of intermittent fasting is the 16-8 method. 16-8 is a form of time-restricted eating where you limit your food intake to just 8 hours of the day. And in the other 16 hours, you fast. This could mean breaking your fast for lunch at 1 p.m. and finishing your feeding window at 9 p.m. with dinner. It could also mean eating between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. or whichever 8-hour window works for you. The point is, you're fasting for 16 hours and you're eating for 8 hours. Now, this study seems to perfectly demonstrate that this approach is a problem. No one wants to increase their risk of death by 91%. But let me tell you why you've got nothing to worry about. Firstly, the data was from self-reported dietary intakes. We have no way of ascertaining their accuracy. Secondly, 2003 to 2018 is a window the majority of which covers a time frame before intermittent fasting became a thing. It wasn't popular yet. Why is this relevant? Well, the reality here is that this study isn't looking at people who were intentionally engaged in an intermittent fasting protocol. We're just looking at people who skip breakfast. Sporadic dietary patterns and skipping meals is not the same thing as intermittent fasting. We know that having consistent meal routines make for healthy dietary choices. We also know that people who eat breakfast have better regulated hunger and are therefore likely to eat better throughout the rest of the day. On the contrary, people who skip breakfast tend to have a way poorer quality of diet. They also tend to be more overweight in the first place, both of which put you at a way higher risk of cardiovascular disease. The increased risk of death we're seeing in this study isn't a result of intermittent fasting, but rather a reflection of a demographic that have pretty haphazard dietary patterns. If I'm routinely missing meals, skipping breakfast, but I'm still eating a diet made up of highly processed foods and eating way more calories than I need, then you can blame the fasting all you want. But that's like blaming the passenger for the car crash. It was the driver that crashed the car, the passenger was just there. One more thing to point out is something called reverse causality. People who are predisposed to cardiovascular disease, diabetic, overweight, are going to be more likely to skip meals or fast in an effort to reduce their weight, whereas those who are healthier are less likely to feel the need to do this. Let me give you another example. People who've never struggled with their weight will likely never go on a diet. People who are overweight or have been overweight are far more likely to engage in a diet. But it would be silly and inappropriate to conclude that dieting leads to having a higher body weight, because it's the wrong way round of looking at things. And that's probably part of what's happened here. What we know is that when we equate calories, activity level, and other health parameters, we don't find any negative effects from fasting. If anything, in free living settings where people aren't tracking their calories and they're just letting the chips fall where they may, what research shows us is that intermittent fasting may even lead to greater losses of body fat. And given that weight reduction is one of the most significant risk mitigators of cardiovascular disease, I'm inclined to tell you that intermittent fasting, when done properly, won't increase your risk of anything. It's more likely to do the complete opposite, as shown in this systematic review here. By the way, not all research carries the same weight. Cohorts, like the study we're looking at, only show us patterns and trends when following a population over time. Systematic reviews and meta-analyses look at multiple studies, accounting for quality, limitations, biases. If I want a more accurate picture of what's going on, that's where I put my money. You can lose at the slot machines once and be convinced that the casino is corrupt, and it might be, but it's only when you analyze all the games played by all the players over a period of time that you can actually get a better understanding of what's going on in the casino. My 2 cents, when all other variables are equal, like calorie intake, protein intake, activity level, there's no difference on health and body composition between fasting versus not fasting. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just another method to create a calorie deficit. And if you find that's what works better for you on a level of base preference, I'm fine with that, provided you're not just eating a junk food diet, skipping breakfast, and calling that intermittent fasting. One person sporadically skips meals, but eats a diet of highly processed foods, no vegetables, no protein, drinks heavily and does no exercise. Another person intentionally omits breakfast to create a calorie deficit, but eats a high protein, high fiber diet and exercises regularly. These are not the same thing, and they can't be treated as if they are, which I believe is exactly what's happening with the conclusions people are gleaning from this study.